It's been a while since I've done most interesting books, so let's talk about that today. Hi, hello, and welcome back to my channel. My name is Alex, and today we are talking about some of the most interesting books I've ever read. This is going to be part 4. I've done parts 1, 2, and 3. It's been a minute since I've continued on with this series. But yeah, I figured it's been long enough, let's get back into it. So make sure you hit all the buttons down below so you know when I'm posting. I post every week, and all we do on this channel is talk about books. So if you like listening to people talk about books, here I am every week doing just that for you. So when we say most interesting book I've ever read, when I first started this list, it was this whole idea of books that live in my head rent-free. Are these books perfect books, like 5-star reads? No. In fact, some of these books I didn't even really like that much. If you go back through the other parts, I do talk about that, like how some of these books had major issues for me, like plot holes and pace issues and things like that. But these are books that I recall on because either like the formatting was super interesting, the premise of the book was really cool, the vibes were really cool. These are books that just live in my head rent-free. Like after reading them maybe like a few years ago, I still think back to this book. I still remember this book. So yeah, these are just some of the most interesting books for me. Ones that just won't ever leave me alone. If that makes any sense. So I'm only doing 3 titles today. So yeah, let's get into it. Okay, so the first book we're going to talk about is Sharp Teeth by Toby Barlow. And I actually came across this book. I think it was like a Pinterest post, and it said that it was one of those books that just really messes with you. And I was like, oh yeah, I want to read a book that really messes with me. Did I love this book? I think the premise and the formatting of this book really made it attractive and interesting, but when I dug into it, it was really lacking in a lot of different and needable areas, if that makes any sense. So, premise, what's it about? Dogs. In short, basically there's rival werewolf or lichen gangs in the city, and this one man who is a dog catcher gets kind of caught in the middle of this sort of turf war between these two rival lichen gangs. Yeah, it's super interesting. Let me just put that on there. It's really interesting because the way that Toby Barlow wrote this is almost like poetic stanzas, but it's not poetic. I don't really know how to describe it. The formatting was super interesting, but the way that he formatted it and the way that he wrote it lent it to a way that meant there was very little description, very little scene setting, very little character visualization. Did it make for an easy read? Yes. It was very high action, a lot of the time. It was very hyper focused. I wasn't bored with the storyline, but if you're one of those people that need a lot of visualizations, if you need a lot of padding, this will probably feel very boring. But if you're one of those people that can just fill in the edges yourself as you go, and you don't really care for a lot of padding, this would probably really work for you. And like I said, the pace really worked, and it was very interesting. This formatting probably is not for everybody, but Toby Barlow really succeeded in what he was trying to do, I think. And I think there's probably only a few authors that would actually excel in this format, and I think that he did. It gets lots and lots of bonus points for the formatting, and that's probably one of the reasons that it will always stick with me, is because I'm never going to forget reading this book. And I'm never going to forget the ending of this book. There's a lot happening in this book, and the way that it all culminated was really, really, really cool. So, yeah. I'll never stop thinking about this book. The next book we're going to talk about is The Midnight Library by Matt Haig. Y'all have heard me talk about The Midnight Library because The Midnight Library has my heart, like forever. This is one of those books that I just absolutely loved. And I feel like it's kind of cheating to put it on this list. But I really, really loved this book. And it by far is one of the more interesting premises of books that I've read in a while. Like, my heart will always tug for this book, okay? So the premise is we have our female main character. I can't really recall her name now. She's struggled through her life with her mental health and things like that. And she's always wondered, you know, what her life would have looked like if she had made different decisions along the way instead of the decisions that she did make, or instead of some of these pivotal life things happening to her if they hadn't happened at all. So she struggles with her mental health and ends up in the place between life and death. In this book, the place between life and death is a library. I think her name's Nora, now that I think about it. So she's in this library, and every book in this infinite shelving of library is a moment in her life that went differently. And she can take the books out and read them and immerse herself into the world where that decision that she made was different, or this pivotal life moment that happened to her did not happen, or something else happened instead. So she gets to go through this library and see all the things that could have been if her life had been different. If you like the multiverse, I think you would like this book. This is a very interesting take to me because it's not the parallel universe type way that we typically talk about. It's almost like just getting a glimpse in time. Time is irrelevant when we're looking at this. If you're looking for something very science fiction-y, this is not it. It does not get very cryptic. It does not get very detailed in the, you know, the science of world hopping or the multi-universe. So, yeah, if you want something science fiction-y, this is not it. A lot of people complain that this book kind of felt like a self-help book. Yeah, I could definitely see how it could come across that way. I, for one, absolutely loved it. Some people complain that our female main character was very privileged and, you know, crying about her life quite a bit. And, you know, to that, I just think there were some really hard things that happened to this character that were out of her control. Like, she didn't want, or decisions that she didn't make that were made for her. And I also just have to say that mental health affects everybody. So whether you have a lot of opportunities in life or very few, you can still have depression. You can still have mental health issues, whether or not you're privileged or underprivileged. So yeah, I feel like that was kind of a weird thing to say. Like, just because you have opportunities doesn't mean that, like, the chemicals in your brain work properly. I mean, depression can happen to anybody. So I just really loved this book. As someone who constantly thinks about, like, the road that was not traveled, as someone who thinks about what would have happened if this huge life thing hadn't happened to me, I constantly think like that all the time. I feel like that all the time. This book spoke to me in a way that I wasn't really expecting, and I absolutely loved. I think the premise and the setup of this book was really well done. I really liked the idea of getting to see your whole world in a library. It was very interesting to me. I absolutely love this book. I will never forget this book, and this is one of those ones that I'll pretty much recommend to anybody. Yeah, you should check it out for sure. Okay, the last book I'm going to talk about today is The Deep by Nick Cutter. This is a horror book, and I read this last October. In my head, I'm like, you know, that wasn't really that long ago. It was, though. Quite a few books ago that I read this, and it still freaks me out. Like, when I think about certain aspects of this book, I literally get sick to my stomach. I get really tensed up, and my mind just replays a lot of the moments from this book. So it was definitely interesting. Was it perfect? No, I had issues with this book. I had really bad pace issues when we got towards the end. I feel like Nick Cutter was just really dragging us along, and I was being dragged along. Like, I was really anxious for the ending, and I feel like he kind of pulled a really long time into that ending, and yeah. Let's talk about the premise of this book. So basically, there are two brothers, and one is kind of like this sciencey genius, and one is sort of not. He's kind of just like an everyday guy. I think he's like a professor, maybe. So he's not like, oh, one's super smart and one's super dumb. He's not dumb, but he's not like a super genius like his brother is. So basically, these two brothers have not talked probably like over a decade. A pandemic happens where people start to forget things. First, it's small, like forget where you put your car keys, you forget how to tie your shoes, how to put your clothes on. Then it becomes bigger and bigger. You forget how to drive, you forget how to eat, you forget how to take care of yourself, until at some point you stop being alive because you literally forget how to be alive. It's a really interesting premise. And so, as we're in this pandemic, trying to figure out how to stop it or whatever, a lot of horrifying things happen to our main character, and he gets a phone call from the government saying, hey, your brother is in this laboratory under the ocean and he needs your help. The brother that he hasn't heard from in over a decade, who's a super genius, wants his help, and he's like, well, I'm not doing anything else. I guess I should go and try and save humanity or whatever and do my part. So yeah, I guess I'll go. So yeah, they go, and turns out his brother's like in the deepest part of the Marianas Trench in an underwater lab trying to search for a cure for this thing. And they're like, oh yeah, some weird stuff has happened and we've totally lost communication, but you should 100% go down in this submersible thing and go down to the station and, try and figure out what's going on, and if possible, bring our staff that's still down there back up. It's as frightening as, way more frightening than I was prepared for. And I knew, people have told me, I have been warned that Nick Cutter is extremely graphic in his horror writing. He writes a lot of body gore and things like that. I knew going in that this was probably going to be really gross and graphic. I was not prepared. Even though I told myself that it was going to be bad, I wasn't really prepared. Nick Cutter is a genius at writing body gore and just gore in general. If you really like horror like that, Nick Cutter is your guy. He does not hold back. It's all very visual. It's very well done gore, okay? And then just the mind game that was played throughout this, because we're in sort of a desolate but claustrophobic situation type setting because we're under the water so far down. If anything were to minutely happen, they would all be dead before you would even realize something bad happened. That sort of pressure, quite literally, is terrifying. It messes with your brain, right? And a lot of these scientists that have been down there trying to work through these issues, the isolation, the toll that it takes on your brain being isolated like that, it's awesome. The way that he's done it is just so brilliant. Did I love this book? Like I said, I had pace issues, especially at the end, but there was a moment in the middle where we really took a huge detour off the main subject matter, and I was like, when are we gonna... In the end, it did end up being necessary, but I don't think it needed to be as long as it was. I think he really stretched it, and I don't think it needed to be stretched as much as he did. So I did have some issues. Was it brilliant? It was brilliantly disgusting, and the ending of this book, just poof. It was so much bigger than I was prepared for. Makes me question my entire reality big sort of ending. So yeah, it completely exceeded my expectations. So yeah, and this is, I'm like I said, I read this, it'll be almost a year ago, maybe, like, you know, in October it'll be a year ago. It lives in my head all the time. All the time. And if you know this about me, the deep parts of the ocean, like, terrify me. The deep water terrifies me. So this was just like another thing to like heighten it up for me, is that being in the deep ocean really freaks me out. We don't need to be down there. We don't need to be down there. We really don't. And this book just highlighted the fact that, like, see, that could not be me. Could not be me. I would never. I don't care who needs my help. I'm not going. This one gets like just lots of bonus points for just being undescribably weird and just graphic. Like, Nick Cutter gets all the applause for the gore writing. It's some of the best gore writing I've read. And, you know, I do read a lot, not a lot, but quite a bit of horror. So, I mean, it's very good. If you don't like gore writing, do not even attempt this book. I am not kidding. If you don't like gore writing, skip Nick Cutter altogether, because this is what he's known for. So yeah, that's all I have for you guys today. I know it's kind of short, but yeah. This list just keeps getting longer and longer. Like, the more books that I read, I keep adding, like, if there are books I know I'll never stop thinking about, they go on the list. Let me know in the comments if there's books that live in your head rent-free, whether you liked them or not. That's the big thing, is like, not all of these books I really liked. If you go back and watch the other parts, I didn't love all of these books. Some of these books had really big issues. They were not all 5-star reads for me. But the premise is that they're books I'll never stop thinking about. Most definitely books I'll never stop thinking about. Make sure you hit all the buttons down below so you know when I'm posting. I post every week. And yeah, I will see you guys next time. Bye!